The alarm sound woke Jake Morrison from his deep sleep. His eyes opened slowly in the dark room. The red warning lights flashed on and off across the walls of the sleeping area. Something was wrong with the ship. Jake rolled out of his sleeping pod and put his feet on the cold metal floor. The ship felt much colder than it should. His breath made small clouds in the air. This was not normal for the Starbound during hypersleep time. He walked quickly to the main control room. The ship's computer showed many red warning signs on the screens. The thermal control system had failed 3 days ago. Jake felt his heart beat faster as he read the error messages. The heating system was completely broken. "Computer, show me the crew status," Jake said out loud. The screen changed to show all the crew members. The 6 human crew members showed green lights, which meant they were okay. But the 12 alien crew members from the planet Zephyr showed yellow warning lights. Their body temperature was dropping fast. Jake ran to the medical bay where Amy Rodriguez was already awake and checking the readings. Amy was the ship's doctor and she looked worried. "Jake, we have a big problem," Amy said while looking at her medical screens. "The Zephyrians are freezing. Their bodies are made of crystal-like material that breaks when it gets too cold. If we don't warm them up soon, they will die." Jake looked at the sleeping pods where their alien friends lay still. Commander Zixtel, the Zephyrian captain, was in the pod closest to them. His skin looked pale blue instead of its normal bright silver color. Tiny cracks were starting to show on his arms. "How long do we have?" Jake asked. "Maybe 6 hours before the damage becomes too bad to fix," Amy replied. "Maybe less for some of them." Jake pressed buttons on the control panel, trying to restart the heating system. Nothing worked. The main power unit that controlled temperature was completely dead. It would take days to fix, and they did not have days. "Can we wake them up?" Jake asked. Amy shook her head. "Waking up from hypersleep too early makes people very sick. For humans it's bad, but for Zephyrians it could kill them. Their bodies need the full sleep cycle to work right." Jake walked back and forth in the small room, thinking hard. The ship's emergency heating units could only warm one pod at a time, and only for short periods. It would not be enough to save. All 12 aliens, Lisa Park and Ben Carter, came into the medical bay. They had also woken up when the alarm started. Lisa worked with navigation and Ben was an engineer like Jake. Both of them looked cold but healthy. "What's happening?" Lisa asked, pulling her jacket closer around her body. Jake explained the problem. The 4 humans stood quietly, looking at their sleeping alien friends. The Zephyrians had been good crew members and friends during their time together before hypersleep started. "There has to be something we can do," Ben said. "Humans have survived cold weather for thousands of years. There must be a way." Jake thought about his childhood on Earth. His grandmother had lived in a cold place where winters were long and hard. She had taught him old ways to stay warm when the power went out. One memory came back to him very clearly. "My grandmother used to make blankets," Jake said slowly. "She would knit them by hand using yarn and needles. The blankets kept people warm even in the coldest weather." Lisa looked at him with confusion. "Knitting? You mean making cloth by hand?" "Yes," Jake said, his voice getting more excited. "The ship has material we could use. The fabrication machines could make needles and yarn from the repair supplies. If we make thermal blankets for each Zephyrian, we might be able to keep them warm enough." Amy checked her medical readings again. "Their body temperature is still dropping. We need to do something now." Ben looked doubtful. "Jake, do you even know how to knit?" Jake nodded. "My grandmother taught me when I was young. She said it was important for everyone to know how to make warm things with their hands. I thought it was just an old hobby, but maybe it can save our friends." Lisa walked over to one of the alien pods and looked at the readings. "The computer says each Zephyrian needs a very specific temperature range. Too hot or too cold will hurt them." "Can handmade blankets really be that precise?" "We have to try," Jake said. "The medical computers can tell us exactly what temperature each alien needs. We can make the blankets thick or thin to get the right amount of warmth." Amy looked at her watch. 5.5 hours left. Can we really make 12 blankets in that time? Jake was already moving toward the supply room. We won't know until we try. Ben, can you help me modify the fabrication system to make knitting? Supplies? Lisa, can you calculate how thick each blanket needs to be? Amy, keep watching the aliens and tell us if anything changes. The four humans split up to begin their impossible task. Jake's hands were already thinking about the movements his grandmother had taught him so many years ago. He hoped that an old Earth skill could save their alien friends in the cold darkness of space. The ship continued its journey through the stars while inside. Four humans began a race against time to save 12 lives using nothing but yarn, needles, and determination. Jake ran through the ship's corridors toward the supply room. His breath still made small clouds in the cold air. Behind him, he could hear Ben's footsteps as they both hurried to find materials for their plan. The supply room held boxes of repair materials for the ship. Jake pulled out containers of synthetic fibers that were normally used to fix broken cables and equipment. The fibers were strong and flexible, perfect for making yarn. This could work, Jake said, holding up a bundle of white synthetic material. These fibers can hold heat well, and they're soft enough to knit with. Ben opened another box and found metal components. Look at these wire pieces. If we melt them down and reshape them, we could make knitting needles. They carried armfuls of materials to the ship's fabrication room. The fabrication machines could reshape materials into almost anything they needed. Jake programmed the machine to make long, thin knitting needles from the metal pieces. The machine hummed as it worked, creating smooth needles in different sizes. Meanwhile, Ben worked on another machine to spin the synthetic fibers into yarn. The process was slow, but the yarn that came out looked strong and warm. Jake tested it by wrapping some around his cold fingers. It felt soft and held his body heat well. In the navigation room, Lisa Park was busy with calculations. She had pulled up the medical files for all 12 Zephyrian crew members. Each alien had different body measurements and different temperature needs. This is more complicated than I thought, Lisa said to herself as she worked. The computer screen showed charts and numbers for each crew member. Commander Zixtel needed the warmest blanket because his crystal skin was the most sensitive to cold. The younger Zephyrians could handle slightly cooler temperatures. Some of the aliens were tall and thin, while others were shorter and wider. Each blanket would need to be a different size and thickness. Lisa created a chart showing exactly how much yarn and what kind of stitching pattern each blanket would need. She printed out 12 different instruction sheets, one for each alien. Crew member. In the medical bay, Amy Rodriguez watched the alien crew members with growing worry. The temperature readings kept dropping. 2 of the Zephyrians now showed red warning lights instead of yellow. Their crystal skin was starting to crack in more places. We're running out of time, Amy said into her communication device. How are you doing with the supplies? Jake's voice came back through the speaker. We have the first batch of needles and yarn ready. Are you sure this will work? Amy looked at the medical readings again. Honestly, I don't know. But their bodies are designed to work in very specific temperature ranges. If we can create the right amount of insulation around each pod, it might keep them warm enough. Kate Miller and Danny Walsh had woken up when they heard all the activity in the ship. They came to the medical bay to see what was happening. You're going to knit blankets to save aliens? Danny asked with surprise. That sounds crazy. Kate looked at the sleeping Zephyrians in their pods. She had worked with them for months before Hypersleep began. They were good people who had become her friends. I know how to knit too, she said. My mother taught me when I was little. If Jake thinks this can work, I want to help. Danny still looked doubtful. But can we really make 12 blankets in just a few hours? I've never knitted anything in my life. Then you'll learn today, Jake said as he came into the room carrying supplies. His arms were full of yarn in different colors and knitting needles of various sizes. We don't have time for doubt. We have friends who need our help. Ben arrived with Lisa, who was carrying her instruction sheets. She handed one sheet to each person. These show exactly what kind of blanket each alien needs. the measurements, the thickness, and the stitching pattern. Jake looked at his instruction sheet. It was for Commander Zixtal and showed a complex pattern that would create air pockets for extra warmth. This looks difficult, but not impossible. Amy checked her watch. 4 hours and 30 minutes left. Can we really do this? Jake sat down and picked up his knitting needles. His hands remembered the movements his grandmother had taught him. My grandmother always said that when people work together, they can do amazing things. She made blankets for everyone in her neighborhood during bad winters. Kate sat down next to Jake and started working on a blanket for one of the younger Zephyrians. Her hands moved quickly as muscle memory came back to her. I haven't done this in years, but it feels natural. Lisa, Ben, and Danny watched as Jake and Kate began knitting. The yarn flowed through their fingers as they created the first rows of stitches. It looked like magic to the others. Show us how to do it, Lisa said. We need all hands working if we're going to finish in time. Jake and Kate spent 20 minutes teaching the others the basic stitches. Danny struggled at first, dropping stitches and getting his yarn tangled. But Ben picked it up quickly, and Lisa was soon knitting with steady rhythm. I can't believe I'm learning to knit to save aliens in space, Danny said, but he kept working on his blanket anyway. Amy continued monitoring the patients while the others worked. Their temperature is still dropping, but the rate is slowing down. We might have a little more time than I thought. The 6 humans settled into their work. The recreation room became their knitting center, with yarn and needles spread across every table. Each person focused on their assigned blanket. Following Lisa's instructions carefully, the ship continued its journey through the dark space while inside. 6 humans began the strangest rescue mission in the history of space travel. The first hour of knitting went slowly. Jake's fingers hurt from gripping the needles so tightly. He kept making mistakes and had to pull out rows of stitches to fix them. The blanket for Commander Zixtal needed a very complex pattern, and Jake struggled to remember all the steps. This is harder than I remembered, Jake said, wiping sweat from his face despite the cold air. His grandmother had made it look so easy when he was young. Kate was making better progress with her blanket. Her hands moved in a steady rhythm as she created row after row of warm fabric. Don't think too hard about it, she told Jake. Let your hands remember what to do. Danny had dropped his knitting 3 times already. His yarn was tangled in knots and his blanket looked more like a twisted rope than fabric. I'm terrible at this, he said with frustration. Maybe I should just help carry supplies instead. No, Lisa said firmly while working on her own blanket. We need every person knitting. Amy is watching the aliens, so that leaves 5 of us to make 12 blankets. We can't do it without everyone helping. Ben had found a good rhythm with his knitting. His engineer mind helped him understand the pattern as a set of instructions to follow. Danny, try holding your needles like this, he said, showing him a different grip. It might be easier. Amy's voice came over the communication system from the medical bay. Bad news. 3 of the Zephyrians are now in critical condition. The cracks in their skin are getting worse. We need to get blankets on them soon. Jake looked at his barely started blanket and felt panic rise in his chest. They had been working for an hour and he only had a few inches of fabric done. At this rate, they would never finish in time. We need to work faster, Jake said. Kate, can you help me with this pattern? Your hands are quicker than mine. Kate looked at her own blanket, then at Jake's instruction sheet. I can try, but I'm not sure I understand this complex design. Lisa had an idea. What if we split the work differently? Kate and Jake work on the most difficult blankets because they have the most experience. The rest of us focus on the simpler patterns for the younger aliens. They reorganized their work. Jake took the blankets for Commander Zixtal and 2 other senior Zephyrians who needed the most complex thermal protection. Kate worked on blankets for the diplomatic team members who needed medium complexity patterns. Lisa, Ben, and Danny focused on the simpler blankets for the younger crew members. The new system worked better. Danny stopped making as many mistakes when he had a simple pattern to follow. Ben's engineering skills helped him knit very even, precise stitches. Lisa worked methodically, checking each row against her instruction sheet, but progress was still too slow. After 2 hours, they had only completed one blanket, a simple one that Danny had finally finished for the youngest Zephyrian crew member. "This isn't working," Danny said, throwing down his needles. "We're going to fail. Those aliens are going to die because we thought we could save them with yarn." Amy's voice interrupted his complaint. "I'm bringing the emergency heating unit to Commander Zixtal S. Pod. His condition is getting critical. We might lose him in the next hour." Jake felt his heart sink. His hands were raw from the needles and his eyes hurt from staring at the tiny stitches. Maybe Danny was right. Maybe this plan was stupid. But then Jake remembered something his grandmother used to say. When the winter is coldest, that's when people need warm blankets the most. Every stitch matters, even if it takes all night. "We're not giving up," Jake said, picking up his needles again. "Amy, how long can the emergency heater keep one alien warm?" "About 30 minutes at a time." "Then it needs to cool down for an hour," Amy replied. Jake had an idea. "Then we focus on one alien at a time. We finish one blanket completely, put it on the most critical patient, then move to the next one. Amy, use the emergency heater to keep Commander Zixtal alive until we get his blanket done." Kate nodded. "That makes sense. All 5 of us work on one blanket together instead of trying to do everything at once." They gathered around Jake's complex pattern for Commander Zixtal. Kate showed the others how to work on different sections of the same blanket. Lisa worked on the middle section while Ben and Danny handled the edges. Jake focused on the most difficult thermal regulation parts. With 5 people working on one blanket, progress happened much faster. Their combined efforts created a steady flow of warm fabric. Danny's simple stitches were perfect for the basic sections, while Jake and Kate handled the complex parts. "It's actually working," Ben said with surprise as he watched the blanket grow larger. "Look how much we've done in just 30 minutes. Amy's voice came through the speakers again. "Commander Zixtal's temperature has stabilized with the emergency heater. But I can see more cracks forming on 2 other aliens. We need to hurry." The team worked without stopping. Their fingers were sore and their backs hurt from bending over their knitting, but they kept going. Kate started humming an old song her mother used to sing while knitting, and the others found the rhythm helped them work faster. "Almost done with the first blanket," Jake announced. He was adding the final rows that would make it the right size. For Commander Zixtal's pod. Danny looked at the clock on the wall. 3 hours left. "If we can keep this pace, we might actually do it." Lisa was already organizing yarn for the next blanket. "As soon as we finish this one, we move to the next most critical patient. No breaks, no stopping." Jake tied off the last stitch on Commander Zixtal's blanket. It was beautiful, thick, and warm with complex patterns that would hold heat perfectly around the alien's crystal body. "Amy, we're bringing the first blanket now," Jake said, standing up with tired but hopeful eyes. 1 down, 11 to go. Jake and Kate carried the first completed blanket to the medical bay. Amy was waiting by Commander Zixtal's pod with the emergency heater still running. The alien captain's skin looked worse than before, with deep cracks spreading across his arms and face. "Turn off the heater," Jake said. "Let's see if our blanket works." Amy switched off the emergency heating unit. Jake and Kate carefully wrapped the thick thermal blanket around Commander Zixtal's body inside his pod. The blanket fit perfectly, covering him from head to toe with extra fabric. Tucked around the edges, they watched the temperature readings on the medical screen. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. Then slowly, the numbers began to climb. Commander Zixtal's body temperature started rising back toward the safe range. "It's working," Amy said with amazement. "The blanket is actually keeping him warm." Jake felt a wave of relief wash over him. His grandmother's old skill was saving an alien's life in the depths of space. "How long before we know if he's stable?" "Give it another 10 minutes, Amy replied. "But this looks very good so far." Jake and Kate hurried back to the recreation room where the other 3 humans were already working on the second blanket. This one was for Vexara, the Zephyrian engineer. who was showing critical signs. "The first blanket is working," Jake announced to the group. "Commander Zixtal's temperature is going up?" Danny looked up from his knitting with new energy. "Really? We actually did it?" "One down, 11 to go," Ben said, but he was smiling now. "If we can save one, we can save them all." The team worked on Vexara's blanket with new confidence. Their hands moved faster and more smoothly than before. Jake had figured out a new stitching technique that created better air pockets for insulation. He showed the others how to twist the yarn in a special way that trapped more warm air. Lisa had improved her calculations too. She realized that the blankets needed to be slightly larger than the aliens' bodies to create a layer of warm air around them. She adjusted the measurements for all the remaining blankets. "We're getting better at this," Kate observed as she worked on a complex section. "My hands remember more of what my mother taught me." Ben had made his own discovery. He found that adding thin strips of metal wire from the repair supplies made the blankets hold heat even better. The metal conducted warmth from the aliens' bodies and spread it evenly through the fabric. "Look at this," Ben said, showing them a section of blanket with metal threads woven through it. "The temperature stays more stable with these metal fibers mixed in." They finished Vexara's blanket in just 40 minutes, much faster than the first one. Jake and Amy took it to the medical bay and wrapped it around the alien engineer. Again, the blanket worked perfectly. Vexara's temperature began rising within minutes. "Two down," Amy said, checking her medical readings. "But we still have several aliens in critical condition." Back in the recreation room, the team was already working on the third blanket. Their system was running like a well-oiled machine now. Kate organized the yarn, Lisa calculated measurements, Ben added metal reinforcement threads, Danny worked on simple sections, and Jake handled the complex thermal regulation patterns. They were making progress faster than expected, but Amy brought bad news from the medical bay. "3 more aliens just went critical," she announced over the communication system. "Their body temperatures are dropping fast. We need blankets for them soon." Jake looked at the clock. They had been working for 4 hours total, and they only had 2 blankets completed. At their current pace, they might not finish in time to save everyone. "We need to speed up even more," Jake said. "Kate, can you teach Lisa and Ben some of the advanced techniques? If more of us can do the complex work, we can split up again." Kate spent 15 minutes showing Lisa and Ben how to create the special thermal regulation patterns. Lisa's mathematical mind picked up the technique quickly. Ben's engineering skills helped him understand how the stitches work together to trap heat. "I think I've got it," Lisa said, practicing the new stitch pattern. "It's like building a tiny insulation system with each row." They reorganized again. Now they had 3 teams working on 3 blankets at the same time. Jake and Kate worked together on the most difficult blankets. Lisa worked with Ben on medium complexity patterns. Danny focused on finishing work and adding metal reinforcement threads to completed sections. The recreation room buzzed with activity. Yarn flew through fingers as the humans knitted with desperate determination. They were racing against time, but now they were winning. Amy came to check on their progress. "The first 2 aliens are stable, and their skin cracks are starting to heal. Whatever you're doing, it's working perfectly." Jake felt his confidence grow. "How much time do we have left?" "About 90 minutes before we lose the critical patients," Amy replied. "But at this rate, you might actually finish all 12 blankets in time." The team worked in focused silence, their hands moving in perfect rhythm. Each completed blanket brought them closer to saving all their alien friends. Danny had stopped complaining and was knitting as fast as anyone. His simple stitches were neat and strong. "Blanket number 5 finished," Ben announced, holding up his completed work. Kate looked at their progress with satisfaction. "We're going to make it. I can feel it. These aliens are going to survive because humans learned to make warm things with their hands thousands of years ago." Jake smiled as he worked on blanket number 6. His grandmother would be proud to know that her knitting lessons had traveled across the galaxy to save lives. The old Earth skill was proving its worth. Among the stars. The final hour passed in a blur of flying needles and determination. Jake's team worked like they had been knitting together for years instead of just one day. Their fingers moved with practiced skill, creating blanket after blanket for their alien friends. Blanket number 9 complete, Lisa announced, holding up her work. The thermal blanket was beautiful, with perfect stitches and metal threads woven throughout. For extra heat retention, Danny was putting the finishing touches on blanket number 10. His knitting had improved dramatically over the past few hours. What started as clumsy, uneven stitches had become neat and professional work. "I never thought I would be good at this," Danny said as he tied off the last row. "But there's something satisfying about making something useful with your hands." Kate and Ben were working together on blanket number 11. It was for Corthan, one of the larger Zephyrian crew members who needed extra coverage. The blanket had to be both longer and wider than the others. "Almost there," Kate said, her fingers flying through the complex pattern. "Just 20 more rows to go." Jake was already starting on the final blanket for Zilanara, the youngest member of the alien crew. Even though she was the smallest Zephyrian, her blanket needed special thermal properties, because young aliens were more sensitive to temperature changes. Amy's voice came over the communication system with an update. "All 9 aliens with blankets are now stable. Their temperatures are in the safe range and the cracks in their skin are healing. You did it, everyone. You actually saved them." The humans felt a surge of energy despite their exhaustion. Their impossible plan was working. They had taken an old Earth skill and used it to save lives in the depths of space. Blanket 11 finished, Ben announced. He and Kate carried it quickly to the medical bay where Amy was waiting. They wrapped it carefully around Corthan's large frame. Within minutes, his temperature readings began to improve. Jake was racing to finish the final blanket. His hands hurt terribly and his eyes were tired from staring at tiny stitches for so long. But he kept going, thinking about young Zilanara lying cold and still in her pod. "Last few rows," Jake said to himself. "Come on, you can do this." The other 4 humans gathered around Jake as he worked on the final stitches. They had become a real team during this crisis, united by their determination to save their friends. "There," Jake said, tying off the last stitch. 12 blankets completed. They all cheered quietly, not wanting to disturb the sleeping aliens. Jake picked up the final blanket, soft and warm in his tired hands. It was the most important thing he had ever made. In the medical bay, they wrapped Zilanara in her custom thermal blanket. Amy watched the temperature readings climb steadily into the safe range. All 12 Zephyrian crew members now showed green lights on the medical screen. "Mission accomplished," Amy said with a tired but happy smile. "Every single alien is stable and healing. Their body temperatures are perfect." The 6 humans collapsed into chairs in the medical bay, finally able to rest. They had worked for over 5 hours straight, knitting blankets to save 12 lives. Their hands were raw and their backs ached, but they had succeeded. "I can't believe we actually did it," Danny said, looking at his sore fingers. When Jake first suggested knitting, I thought he had lost his mind. I thought I had lost my mind too. But my grandmother always said that simple solutions are often the best solutions. Ben was already thinking like an engineer again. "We should keep these blankets as emergency equipment, and I want to fix the thermal system so this never happens again." "Good idea," Jake agreed. "But first, let's document everything we learned. Other crews might face similar problems someday." Over the next few days, Jake repaired the ship's thermal control system using spare parts. The Starbound's heating worked perfectly again, but they kept all 12 hand-knitted blankets stored in the emergency supply room, just in case. 3 months later, the hypersleep cycle ended automatically. The Zephyrian crew members woke up slowly in their pods, still wrapped in the beautiful thermal blankets the humans had made for them. Commander Zixtal was the first to wake up fully. He looked down at the intricate blanket covering his body with confusion. The fabric was unlike anything made by Zephyrian technology. It was clearly handmade with great care and skill. "Jake Morrison," Commander Zixtel said when the human engineer came to check on him. "What is this covering me?" Jake smiled. "It's called a blanket. We made it to keep you warm when the heating system failed. You were freezing, so we knitted thermal blankets for everyone." Commander Zixtel touched the soft fabric with wonder. His people used advanced technology for everything, but they had forgotten the value of things made by hand with care and love. "You made this with your own hands?" "For me?" the alien captain asked. "All of us worked together," Jake replied. "Kate, Lisa, Ben, Danny, Amy, and me. We spent hours making sure each blanket was perfect for each crew member." Tears formed in Commander Zixtel's large eyes. In Zephyrian culture, handmade gifts were the highest form of respect and friendship. The humans had given them something more precious than any advanced technology. Word of the blanket rescue spread throughout the galaxy. When the Starbound reached its destination, the story became famous among all space-traveling species. Humans were already known for their cleverness and determination, but this showed their compassion and willingness to help others. The Zephyrians started a new tradition of making handmade gifts for their human friends. They learned to create beautiful crystal sculptures using only their hands. Following the example the humans had set, Jake kept one photo from that day. All 6 humans sitting together in the recreation room, surrounded by yarn and knitting needles, smiling despite their exhaustion. His grandmother would have been proud to see her simple lesson save 12 lives among the stars. The Starbound continued its mission with the strongest crew bond in the history of space exploration. And in the ship's emergency procedures manual, there was now a new entry: how to knit thermal blankets for alien crew members during heating system failures.